Hey team!
It's Klaxoon.
Hey team, it's Klaxoon.
Hey team, it's Klaxoon.
And we are live. Let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome, guys, to this new Klaxoon Expert webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Mehdi. I work at Klaxoon. I will be your host for the next 30 minutes. Today, we are together to have a wonderful session about a trending topic in the world of work right now, which is engagement and how to achieve high levels of participation in the future of work. To talk about this topic, I'm not by myself. Obviously, we needed a real expert, and we are super happy to have with us today Jonathan Westover. Welcome, and how are you doing today, Jonathan?
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I'm doing fantastic. Good to be with you.
Perfect. Yeah, we will come back to you in a few seconds to introduce you, of course, and start having this discussion. But just before starting, a quick message for our viewers today. This webinar will take about 30 minutes, and we will have a Q&A session at the end. So, of course, feel free to share whatever question, whatever reaction you may have during the session, to comment, ask questions, or just send some love to Jonathan and me in the chat. We love that, and we will answer everything in a few minutes. So first, Jonathan, let's get into it. And before getting started with the topics we wanted to talk about with you today, we want to introduce you to our audience. You have quite an amazing professional journey, so we are curious to know more about it. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you do today?
Sure. Again, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I am chair and professor of organizational leadership and change management at Utah Valley University, and I'm managing partner and principal at Human Capital Innovations, a management consulting firm. I've been, what I consider to be a scholar practitioner for the last 13 plus years since my time entering academia. And I love the academic enterprise. I love doing research. I love teaching. I love doing all of those things. But I also really don't want to be stuck in the ivory tower, and I don't want to, only be doing esoteric kinds of research. But I want to do things that matter and make an impact and improve the lives of people in our organizations, in our communities, and throughout the world. And so that's what I've been trying to do with my teaching, my research, my consulting work. I teach and research and consult in the areas of organizational leadership, people management, change management, organizational ethical decision making, and those sorts of topics.
Perfect. So I always like to ask, and thank you for breaking down that journey with us. I actually like to ask what got you into those fields of expertise, and how you get inspired, and what excites you the most in what you do.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's the long version and then there's kind of a shorter version. I'll try to stick to the shorter version, but I'm a professor, so sometimes I go on a little bit too long. So feel free to stop me at any point if I'm
That's
rambling.
interesting.
I switched majors a whole bunch of times as an undergrad student, as many people do. You're learning about yourself, you're trying to figure yourself out, what you like, what you're good at. I changed majors a bunch of times, and the final time that I switched majors followed an internship. So I'd been studying, I'd kind of gotten a feel for what I liked, but it wasn't until I actually went and did an internship, and it happened that I ended up in the corporate organizational development office at LG Electronics in South Korea. It was kind of a happenstance. Like, that wasn't something I targeted directly. It just kind of happened. And after a summer of doing that, I realized what I was studying just didn't excite me as nearly as much as what I'd been doing. And so I went to my professors and I said, I really want to do what I did over the summer. How do I do that? The university didn't have a program like that. They didn't have anything to help me do that. So my professors, multiple professors said, well, go switch your major, go do a social science. And so that's what I did. I changed my major one more time out of the business school. I switched to sociology. I ended up getting my bachelor's in sociology with emphases in research and analysis, with a minor in business and a minor in Korean language. And then I went on for my master's degree, where I focused on human resource management and organizational behavior. And during that whole time, I always worked going through school. And again, having done that internship, that experiential learning, it was so meaningful. And those were the types of jobs I was doing from that point forward. And as I was getting close to finishing my master's degree, my intention had been to either be an internal consultant working within organizations like I did at LG, to help improve the organization, to help coach and train leaders, to help the organization work more effectively, to engage their people, etc. So either do that internally as an internal change agent, as an internal consultant, or do it externally and work with a consulting firm and go around and do that. Ultimately, I decided that neither of those options seemed to fit super well with my family priorities at the time. Married, having children, the amount of workload and travel and some of those sorts of things seemed untenable, and they didn't seem sustainable to me in the long run. And so ultimately, I decided to go on and get a PhD and become a professor, with the intention that I always wanted to continue to do consulting work. And I love teaching. I love doing research, and whether it's research within an organization, or it's more academic types of research, is something I always knew that I loved to do. And once I finished my PhD, I got hired as a tenure track professor. Since then, I've been able to get tenure. I've been able to get rank advancement to full professor, and continue to do all those things that I love. But the nice thing about being a professor is not only is it a super secure job, which is really nice, but I always consider my professor role as like my home base. And it gives me the opportunity to try a bunch of stuff. I started my own consulting firm back in 2007. I'm not sure I would have had the guts to do that if it was an all or nothing proposition, like not have a normal, quote unquote, normal job, put up my own shingle, start my own firm, and just take that leap of faith. I'm not sure I would have done that. I'm probably a little bit too risk averse to have done that. But because I have, my professor and university job, that's my home base, and it gives me lots of opportunity to just try stuff and do different things. And that has been super fun over these the last decade and a half or so. And I continue to do that. And like I said earlier, what I really want to do, what I try to do, is be a scholar practitioner. I try to make sure that I bring industry and real world into the classroom, into my research, and I try to make sure that I bring my research and my teaching and my pedagogy, my training and development background into how I work with organizations.
Super interesting, actually, like to see like how finally like you built your professional journey, like finally with kind of like contextual like decisions, if I understand well. So that's great. That's great. Thank you. Really inspiring for everyone. Me first. But
and can I say to that, my path was definitely a meandering path. There are people that do what I do that took a much straighter, more linear path.
Yeah.
But I'm in some ways, it would be cleaner, it'd be faster to take that perfectly linear path. But I'm really happy with the path that I've taken. It's been meandering. It's kind of taking me here and there and everywhere. But I think there's a lot of richness that comes from that variety and that context. And it's certainly been something that I found value in as I continued and progressed through my career. Perfect.
Thank you so much for breaking that down for us. Now it's time to get into like the topics and your expertise on what we want to discuss with you. So thank you again for being here with us and share insights and everything. First, topic, we wanted to start off with like the topic of participation and ways to make everyone's voice heard in the workspace and like get those like critical insights from employees. So Jonathan, a really simple question. What are for you the new and most like efficient ways to make sure everyone in organizations express, and especially in the context we know after pandemic and everything?
Yeah, I think pretty much everything that happens within organizations, and as you think about people are messy. Organizations are messy. So anytime you're thinking about an organization or you're thinking about human interaction, we have to build upon a foundation of mutual accountability and trust. Trust is key. And there's lots of things that we can do to enhance trust and to develop it and sustain trust, but there's equally as many things, probably more things that we can do to erode and undermine trust. And a lot of the things that we do every day that we don't even really think about are eroding trust. And it's not because we have an intention of, being a jerk or trying to, micromanage people, or, most leaders, I think, wake up in the morning ready to go, ready to inspire their teams, and they want to do the best they can, and they want to empower people. I think most people have good intentions. The problem is we have all sorts of habits, learned habits over time, sometimes from what we've seen other leaders do in the past. Sometimes it's just we don't know any different. We don't know how to do it. And so we're just putting our best foot forward, and we unintentionally do little things that undermine trust. So we have to think carefully about trust development, trust maintenance, and creating an environment of sustainable trust. And in my mind, one of the most important things, and specifically to get back to your comment about like people being involved and being, feeling like their voice can be heard, that people feel a sense of belonging in the workplace, it all starts with psychological safety in the workplace. If you don't have psychological safety, if people feel like they have to muzzle themselves, they feel like they have to self-censor and edit their thinking, and they're worried about sharing their ideas, that doesn't lead to anything good. That leads to lower levels of engagement. It leads to lower levels of productivity, reduced creativity and innovation. And frankly, people in a psychologically unsafe environment, people just aren't willing usually to put their best foot forward because there's no real good incentive to do so. There's a lot of risk for them speaking up. There's not a lot of upside to them speaking up. And so more often than not, in a psychologically unsafe environment, people will kind of keep their heads down. They don't want to make waves. They'll do what's required, but not necessarily more because they don't want to get on anyone's radar or get in trouble or whatever. And that is an environment that is just status quo. It's stagnant. And in the modern world of work, stagnation is death. If you are stagnant, that means you're not keeping up with innovation. That means you're not keeping up with the competition. And there's no way you're going to continue to add value to the market in a way that will help the organization succeed if you're not constantly leaning into change, creativity, and innovation. So it starts with trust. Upon that trust is built psychological safety. And when we have a psychologically safe environment and culture where everyone, we actively encourage feedback, we actively encourage dissent, we actually encourage people to speak up, to voice concerns, to share their ideas. We encourage people to try stuff, even if it doesn't work, because trying something that doesn't work isn't failure, it's learning, it's developing ourselves, it's developing new products. That can only happen as we, create that kind of an environment. So I think it starts there. When you create a psychologically safe environment, people will have a heightened sense of belonging. They'll feel like their contributions are valued and that they have a chance to contribute in meaningful ways on a regular basis. And that then lays that foundation for just lots of other really great things to come from it.
Yeah, definitely. And that's, thank you for those answers. And that's something we actually see today in organizations. And we can tell it's definitely an area of improvement. So that's funny because we have actually conducted studies at Klaxoon because we're specifically on those areas. And today we know that like half of the workforce is basically frustrated, and especially in meetings because they feel they cannot really like express their opinions, which is like a huge figure. And when you think about it, that's half of the collective intelligence not feeling, comfortable expressing. So yeah, that's definitely a huge area, and creating that like psychological safety definitely like helps, in addition to, for instance, like having tools and everything. But like, yeah, definitely super important. Thank you for that answer. Perfect. Second topic we wanted to talk about with you, focus on engagement. First, and you've been like writing about it and expressing about it. Why is it like for you like key for all sorts of organization to get like the workforce and employees engaged? Basically, why is it key?
Yeah, without engagement, again, you have stagnation, and you just don't progress. So you need people who want to be there, who want to contribute, who feel like they have the support and the means to contribute, and that their contributions are valued. And when that's not there, people aren't engaged, and you end up with high levels of turnover. You end up with quiet quitting. You end up with everything surrounding the Great Resignation, the Great Reevaluation, the Great Reawakening, the Great whatever, right? Dot dot dot. All the things that people have been considering, and a lot of it stems from disengagement. Gallup puts out a yearly study on engagement, and the level of actively disengaged people. So we're not just even talking about people who aren't engaged or aren't engaged at high levels, but people who are actively disengaged is the vast majority of the workforce. And it's only gotten worse during the pandemic. And so the question is, well, why, and what can we do about it? How can we re-engage our people? There is a challenge when people are scattered, when there is remote and distributed teams, but it's not fundamentally a natural outcome of virtual or distributed teams. It doesn't necessarily follow or have to follow that they're going to be disengaged. And I know some people, I was just having a conversation with a team of executives yesterday, and one of them was very adamant that not having people together physically in the same space is suboptimal for engagement and culture. That you can't have good culture, you can't have good engagement unless people are together. And that's a view I hear often. So I hear lots of people voice that. And definitely there's challenges. There's different types of challenges. You have to engage people differently. You have to develop and sustain culture differently when people are distributed, when you have remote workers. But it's not an automatic that it's going to be suboptimal just because they're virtual. But during the pandemic, of course, many leaders who had never worked with virtual teams before all of a sudden were forced to do that. And frankly, they didn't know how to do it. They didn't know how to engage people or to maintain a sense of purpose, a common purpose and culture amongst their team when people weren't together in the office. And so these are the types of things that people are definitely wrestling with right now. There's no quick and easy answer to it, but it's also not all that complicated either. Like, you just have to think about how can you consistently find opportunities to connect with your people, to have meaningful conversations and dialogue, to develop mutual accountability and trust, and do it in a way where people feel valued and they feel supported. So, for example, with this gentleman yesterday, he was lamenting that if people aren't together physically in the office space, then you can't have those organic opportunities to just like wander by their office and say hi and check in with them. You don't have those quote unquote water cooler moments when people are distributed. And that's true. You don't have those just completely random organic opportunities. But I think it's wrong to think that you can only drive engagement and culture through those organic opportunities. In fact, there's lots of other ways that we can do it, and you can do it just as well with distributed teams as you can with in-person teams, or with a hybrid team. And so I think the bottom line is, it's super important. We need to be paying attention to engagement. engagement levels lead to all sorts of positive outcomes for organizations, leads to better, higher levels of satisfaction. It leads to higher levels of motivation. People just produce better work. They produce more creative work, and ultimately it's better for the individual, it's better for the team, and it's better for the organization when we have engaged people. Maybe one last comment on this particular question before we move on. I also like to think of it in terms of kind of this, I recognize it's a false dichotomy, but it's helpful to think about a dichotomy or perhaps a spectrum of compliance versus commitment. If I have a team of people where they're all driven by compliance culture, these are people that usually aren't particularly engaged. They're usually people, they're why are they doing what they're doing? They're doing it because of carrots and sticks. They're doing it because of fear-based authoritarian tactics. They're worried about losing their job, or they're trying to chase that bonus or something like that, and there's a negative attached if they don't do certain things. That kind of approach to engaging people, to motivating people, it can produce short-term strong outputs. Compliance-based approaches can get stuff done. You can accomplish things with a compliance culture, but it's short-lived. You can't get high levels of sustainable effort from people if you have a compliance culture. But if you have more of a commitment culture where people are loyal, they're committed, they have a purpose, they feel meaning in the work that they do, and they're excited to go to work, in that kind of a commitment culture, people, they don't even typically think about going above and beyond. They just think about, showing up for their team and supporting each other and doing cool stuff and learning cool stuff. And that's what really gets them excited. And so when I hear stuff about quiet quitting, I think if your company is experiencing a lot of quiet quitting and you're really worried about that as a leader, I would say one of the first things you need to think about is, do you have a compliance-based culture, or do you have a commitment culture? And quiet quitting is not going to be nearly as common in a commitment culture kind of an environment. It's going to be super common in a compliance culture, because people are just going to try to figure out what the bare minimum is to do to kind of balance the scales and do what needs to get done, where they can save their energy and focus on other things outside of their day.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in any case, I think that's like a huge challenge right now, and definitely like a lot of organizations are like still trying to figure out. A lot of leaders are still like working on it. So that makes it like a really like vivid topic. So that's why it's interesting to talk about it with you. Thank you for those insights again. Time is running, so we have to go to the third topic before like having our Q&A session. We would love to talk like for hours. Maybe we should have you in another one later, but like let's move on. So yeah, third topic, we wanted, and you wrote that super interesting article about questioning in organizations and in leadership. That's something that we also like have kind of in our like core at Klaxoon. So yeah, in a few like sentences, why is it like so critical to never stop questioning in order for you to achieve success for organizations?
Yeah, I think it's at the heart of being a learning organization. If you aren't asking questions, if you're not staying curious, if you're not continually trying to challenge your assumptions and push the envelope, and push the edges of your thinking, then you become complacent, you become stagnant, and you simply don't innovate. And so you have to ask questions, you have to be curious, you have to challenge assumptions. And that's one thing that I think the pandemic has really forced many organizations to do. Why have we always done it this way? Why did we design this job this way? Why does this person have this role? Why does this communication mechanism exist this way? Why is this structured this way? Like, all of those are really important questions we just continually have to ask ourselves and not take it for granted. And if the answer is, I don't really know why it's this way, but it's how it's always been done, if that's the answer, that's a really bad answer. Like that, you shouldn't just do stuff because it's always been done that way. If you can't come up with a good reason, especially if it takes time, energy, money, and you can't think of a good reason for it when you're asking these probing questions, then maybe you need to prune a little bit. Maybe you have to disentangle things. Maybe you have to simplify a bit. Maybe you have to prune back some policies or whatever. And that only happens as we stay curious and we ask questions.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, that's kind of like also, I mean, in Klaxoon, we call it the test and learn like philosophy, just like trying to get new ideas, implement it. It works, that's great. Doesn't work, we try something else, and like just like keep learning from those like mistakes sometimes, but also like just tries eventually. So yeah, that's also something we share, and we'll make sure, and to our viewers, make sure you guys like go read that article, because like that's super interesting actually. Perfect. Thank you so much, Jonathan. We've been like browsing those topics super efficiently. We still have time to run those Q&A and this Q&A session. So I'm just like checking, and we have a first question from Mary. And actually she's circling back on that questioning topic, and she's asking how to create a question-friendly environment in the workspace.
Yeah, and I think actually all of these elements connect to each other. So we talk about trust, we talk about psychological safety. When we create psychological safety, people are more engaged. When they're more engaged and you have a psychologically safe environment, people are willing to question. People are nervous about asking questions if they're worried about what's going to happen, you know. And I've seen it so many times in organizations where you have well-meaning leaders. I don't think they mean to shut down conversation. I don't think they're trying to be authoritative, and I don't think they're trying to squelch, the creativity of their people. But because of the way they run their meetings, because of the way they assert their own opinions, and because of things they do or don't do to create that environment of psychological safety, people just don't feel safe voicing questions. Everyone has questions. We all do. We all have questions in all different aspects of our lives. The question is, do we feel brave enough to say it? And if you can create an environment where people don't have to be super brave, where it's just like part of the norm, it's part of the expectation, where we all push back on each other all the time. And it's like, if you push back on me, if you challenge me, if you ask a question related to something I'm doing, or challenge the assumptions upon which it's based, that you create norms around that, so that it's not seen as like I have a thick skin enough, and I'm confident enough and secure enough that I don't take that as an attack. Like, it's not, I don't get defensive. I in fact, I welcome it, and I want that feedback. Because it helps to refine my thinking. So that's the really healthy organizations, the really healthy teams, is when you can just have that flow, that give and take, and people just expect it of each other. They kind of push on each other to get the best out of each other. But the opposite is also true, and it's rather toxic. It's certainly unproductive, is when people they're afraid. So, it's great to encourage people to be brave, but even better is to just create an environment where they don't even have to be brave, where everyone just can do it naturally, because it's just the way it is.
Perfect. Of course, we agree on that at Klaxoon, because that's the way we do. So yeah, I totally relate with what you just said. Thank you so much, and thank you, Murray, for your question. Second question, really quickly. We're almost done. We need to wrap it up in order to keep timing. Lucia is asking how to make sure shy and reserved employees also make their voices heard. So also a huge challenge. How could we handle that? To you?
Yeah, I think first you need to know your people as a leader, and it takes skill to be able to run a meeting effectively. I've seen many people who are very competent and capable in many ways, and they run terrible meetings. So just because you're good at other aspects of your job doesn't mean you're going to run a good meeting. So learn how to run a good meeting with an agenda, get it out to people in advance with any pre-work, make sure everyone knows they're expected to come prepared, that they're expected to be ready to contribute, give people the opportunity to think before asking them to share. I'm actually pretty introverted guy. So if I'm in a meeting with a bunch of people, my natural tendency is to be quiet, to observe, listen, take it in, make a comment here or there if I feel like it's really important, or if I haven't heard someone else make a similar comment. But otherwise, I'm usually the type that will sit back. But I do have a lot to add. But I also like to think about things. So if something comes up in a meeting that I hadn't thought about yet, we didn't prep for it, and something came up, I need a minute to think about it. I don't want to just talk off the top of my head. I just want to think about it for a minute. So sometimes it's just a matter of giving people the opportunity to prepare in advance. That can help. Creating that psychologically safe environment so people can feel like they can share without retribution or without punishment in some way. And then you can also just actively ask your people that are a little bit more quiet. I actually appreciate that. If I tend to be a little bit more quiet in meetings. If I have someone who's running the meeting who they notice I haven't made a comment in a while, or I haven't shared my perspective on a particular issue, and they'll actually turn to me and say, "Hey John, what do you think?" Like I love that, because I don't like cutting people off. If you have people who are always talking, always sharing their ideas, I'm kind of more inclined to just let them talk. And so I'm not inclined to cut them off. And so having someone give you the entry point to come into it can be really important.
Yeah, I get you, and super interesting because, if I understand well, there's a lot of asynchronous work. If I hear what you say, right, that can be done in order to be the most efficient possible, and also, afterwards, after talking about topics, just have time to think about it and come up with the good ideas, because people sometimes just don't come up instantly with the right ideas. It needs to be kind of thoughts before.
Right. And just an extension of that, and I know we're short on time, but I think of even just differences between me and my wife, for example. Now, I already said I'm introverted. I tend to sit back and listen. I like to be able to think through things a little bit before I speak up. But it's all a spectrum, and I'm probably somewhere closer to the middle, but my wife is way further this way. And so she definitely wants time to think. She does not want to share anything unless she's had time to prepare, to think in advance. And that's she's a brilliant person. It's just a matter of a style difference. It's a preference. And so give people the opportunity to that matter for them, that fit with them, and that'll go a long way in creating that psychologically safe environment and that really dynamic, engaging environment.
Yeah, super interesting, because the way sometimes meetings are run today actually feel not even democratic when we think about it, because it doesn't include everyone and different kind of behaviors and way of operating. That's super interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Jonathan. It's already time to wrap it up. So as I said, we could have talked for hours. We will most likely have you again if you're all right with that as a guest. That was super interesting. Thank you so much. I will leave you the floor. Where can we follow you, our viewers? Where can we get updated on what you do, what you publish, where you write?
Probably the easiest place is just on LinkedIn. So if you search for Jonathan H. Westover on LinkedIn, and I'd love to connect with you. I think that would be fantastic. You can see a lot of the things that I do there. I try to stay pretty active there. And so please take a look at my stuff. I do have a lot of different articles that I publish in outlets like Forbes. I have books. I have a podcast called the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, where I release episodes daily. I'd love for you to check it out. Let me know what you think. And thank you so much for having me and for having this really nice conversation.
That was a pleasure. I'm going to do the same for Klaxoon. Of course, you guys are invited to follow us. We have webinars every other week, basically. So with guests that are trying to be as interesting as Jonathan every other week. So yeah, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for the questions. Thank you, Jonathan, obviously, for being with us today. And yeah, that was a real pleasure to have you guys. Thank you for watching this session. And I'll see you very soon. Bye, guys. Bye, Jonathan.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.